Well, here we are. Our once homely little engine is now considerably better looking, and it runs remarkably well. Sitting here on this granite block, without being clamped, it runs smoothly enough that it barely creeps along the surface at all. Now that you're finished, I'd like you to let your mind wander a little bit if you haven't already done so. The oscillating cylinder arrangement does away with the need for any other form of valving, and the solid piston connecting rod, couldn't really be any simpler, could it? Now, other than making this engine look prettier, could we take the design further? Now, I've always liked looking at old aircraft like Stearman's and Beechcraft, and one of my first ideas was a radial engine. Now, I've seen a lot of radial engines designed by hobby machinists, and while I've been extremely impressed, I wasn't tempted to go out and spend 1,000 hours machining one. But this simple oscillating cylinder setup could easily be arranged, albeit with longer connecting rods to allow for cylinder clearance and with the rods milled in steps, to mount radially on a backing plate. That'd be the world's easiest radial, and it'd probably be a blast to watch. With a simple short, straight backing plate and an extra cylinder and piston, you'd have another of my favorite engine types, the boxer type engine, with horizontally opposed cylinders. But why stop there? If we used an L-shaped backing plate, you could have another one of my favorite engines, a V-twin, only needing an extra cylinder and piston and minor conrod mods to make it run. And guess what? V-twins can easily become V4s. V4s could, with a bit more bother, become V8s and beyond. By simply making interconnecting crankshafts have a second crank wheel instead of a flywheel, and by drilling a hole in that crank wheel to slip over the extended crank pin of the crankshaft behind it, it can be done without too much trouble at all. Now, I wanted to build at least a twin-cylinder design that would prove that what I'm saying is true, but I couldn't decide between my two favorite configurations, the V-twin and the boxer. So I got to thinking, why not both? I sat down and drew out a variable angle backing plate setup. By loosening a clamp at the bottom and a screw that runs in a pair of milled slots on top, you can vary the angle of the cylinders from anything from 90 to 180 degrees of opposition. Weird, but interesting. As they say, the proof of the pudding is in the eating, so why don't we go ahead and take a look. Here's our variable angle twin running in the boxer configuration. Runs smoothly and responds quickly to throttle input. Once running, it'll throttle down to a very slow tick over due to the opposed cylinder configuration. With one cylinder always on the power stroke to carry the other through the exhaust stroke, the response is almost instantaneous. Now, in theory, this setup would offer the highest RPM capability and, as mentioned before, the smoothest running. And aside from being kind of cobby, it looks neat, doesn't it? Now, pardon my arm here as I try to find the correct Allen wrench for the socket head cap screws that hold the backing plate in alignment. First, I'll loosen the bottom clamp, and then by means of an access hole drilled into the crank wheel, I'll loosen the top fixing screw. Now I can adjust the cylinders to 90 degrees, but I could just as easily choose any angle between the two extremes. I haven't had it fail in any angle that I've tried to run it at yet. With the cylinders in this configuration, the engine should lose some high RPM, but it should gain a good bit of low RPM torque. Now that's because for a few degrees of rotation each revolution, both cylinders will be supplying power to the crank at the same time. Now, if you're like me, if you're a bike enthusiast, then you'll recognize the difference between these configurations to be sort of like the difference between the smooth horsepower of a German BMW and the stump-pulling torque of a big old Harley 45-degree twin. Pretty neat, isn't it? Even the exhaust note is different. Can you imagine that radial we were talking about earlier? At any rate, let your imagination wander with this little design. You can scavenge the parts from the primary engine to use if you feel like experimenting with an alternate design, and that's a real time saver. If you do come up with something interesting, please drop us a note at support@swarfrat.com, or you can just go to our website at www.swarfrat.com and hit the Contact Us button. And of course, you can always reach us at our mailing address on the case that this presentation came in. We'd really love to see your projects. Thanks for watching this presentation. Until we meet again, stay safe, happy, and productive.